Good morning. Thank you all for speaking up because there's not many of you today. I think the time change snuck up on some people. So. Anyhow, my name is Melody Breyer. My pronouns are she and her. On behalf of this congregation, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Huntsville. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of native tribes. Whether you have joined us online or you are here in the sanctuary, we are glad you are here with us in this sacred time we choose to be together. We are an open community of learning, caring, and justice making. You are welcome here, every part of you, just as you are. Our congregation is served by the Reverend Jamie Simon, who is currently away on sabbatical leave. Reverend Ruth Van Lillian serves as our sabbatical minister and is available for pastoral care or to answer questions about Unitarian Universalism. She may be reached by contacting the office. If you are a newcomer, please sign our guest book in the back foyer. That gets you on the newsletter, the email newsletter, so you know what's going on. Also, if you need hearing assist devices, they are available. Please take a moment to silence your electronic devices. I thought to do that before I got up here so as to not embarrass my own self. If you have a joy, a sorrow, or a concern, feel free to write them on these white cards that you'll find with your hymnals at the back of the seats, and pass them forward with the offering basket, and we will include you in the circle of candles. For community news and events, check our newsletter. That's why if you're new, you want to sign the book, because that's where most of the information comes from, is that newsletter. We also have a website and a Facebook page. There's some additional announcements inside your paper insert in your program this morning. In the case of inclement weather or last-minute emergencies, that will go out by email. Couple of additional announcements. First, I would like to really thank all the people who showed up yesterday for our property work day. We had 16 people. And those people are included. I want to read you a list of names. I'd like for those folks to stand and be acknowledged. Wayne Schurer, who is our property chair, Brad Korb, Paul Whelan, Barbara and Gary Hitt, Zena Tucker, Jerry Franklin, Shalyn Moody, Andy Mason, Alan Andrews, myself, Ward Welty, LaDawn Edward, Tyler Smith. Plus we had 2 people from the Alabama Hispanic Association that came out and worked with us. So huge turnout. We got a lot done. And again, a round of applause for all those people. Thank you. One more quick announcement. Saturday, March the 22nd, our young adults are going to do s'mores out in the new patio we're building. After the service, everyone is welcome to join us in the fellowship hall for coffee and snacks. Oh, and this is the moment I realize I didn't get somebody to ring the singing bell, so I guess that's me this morning. Finally, having gathered in a shared quest for truth, meaning, and purpose, let us light our chalice with these words. Normally, when we light the chalice, we all focus on the flame. And yet, it is the wax in the candle, the cotton in the wick, the chemicals of the match, the oxygen in the air around us that makes that flame possible. As leaders, we are not called to be a lone beacon on a hill. Rather, we are meant to work together so that we might together shine. And now, to help yourself and quiet your mind, we will have our music for centering, followed by our thread song number 402, From You I Receive. Once again, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Huntsville. We're so glad you have chosen to join us this morning. Let's settle in with these words in our call to worship. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest. Rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives. To resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we can claim ourselves. Breathing in awareness and gratitude. Taking the time to look into one another's faces and see there communion in the reflection of our own eyes. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our time and presence together. And now Bob Weed is going to share with us a testimonial because we are in our pledge drive time.
Good morning. When Jeff and I first became part of the UUCH community in 1987, what we were looking for was a religious home that was not as rigidly dogmatic as the churches of our childhoods. For my part, I had grown up in the Latin American Catholic Church of the 1950s. This was about a decade before the reforms of Vatican II. In the catechism classes of that era, we learned that Catholicism was the only path to salvation. Non-Catholics were destined to spend the rest of eternity in hell. Furthermore, we learned that even if you were Catholic, that was no guarantee that you would make it through the pearly gates. If you had so much as a single mortal sin on your rap sheet at the time of your passing, that did you in. And a mortal sin could be, in the jargon of those days, it could be as minor an infraction as missing Mass Mass one Sunday. And that was what they were teaching 9-year-old kids back then. Jeff Lynn's Presbyterian upbringing was considerably less draconian, but it still was not what she was looking for. What we wanted was a church that would allow us to define our own path, our own definition of what, if anything, constituted salvation, and how to attain that. And whatever we decided, the church would accept and respect. And we found that the UUCH was a perfect religious fit for us. Now, beyond the religion part of the church, we found quite a bit more. We found a community of people that soon went from being acquaintances to being friends to being family. Sociologists use the term the third place to refer to that place that is separate from your home, which is your first place, and your workplace, which is your second place. In one of the places that I read, they said that I found online, said, if I can find this quote, they find your third place is where you relax in public, where you encounter familiar faces and make new acquaintances. And that was very much the role that, one of the roles that the church was meeting for us. And for Jeff Lynn, being a member of the choir meant that she had yet another third place within her third place. But this comfortable place to socialize was even more than that. It became a reliable support system for us. For us, the real value of the church came to the fore in 2011 when Jeff Lynn was diagnosed with a neurodegenerative disease. At first, we were told that the condition she suffered from was an atypical Parkinsonianism, a disease somewhat related to Parkinson's disease. Then later on, this was refined to progressive supranuclear palsy, PSP, the Linda-Ronstadt disease. And this is a jargon that was significant to the neurologists that talked about things like dopamine production and beta and tau protein accumulation. But for us, it was a lot of medical semantics. It didn't mean much. It was, a rose by any other name. The bottom line was that Jefflin had an incurable progressive condition that would gradually impair her ability to do even the most basic activities of life. From the start, what Jefflin most wanted was to be able to hang on to as much of herself as she could for as long as she could. She did not want PSP to define her. She wanted to maintain her identity and let the world know that she was much more than her illness. She was still Jefflin. And that's where the UUCH came in. Our church family continued to provide the companionship and the sense of community that made this coveted continuity possible. And when necessary, the church was there to help us when the situation got beyond what we could handle on our own. A few years ago, I had a medical emergency that landed me in the hospital for 4 days. And, it was a medical emergency. It came on unannounced and progressed rapidly. In the morning, I was feeling fine. In the afternoon, I was in the hospital. And this was at a time when Jefflin's symptoms had already progressed to the point where she could not be at home alone. So, what to do? Well, it only took a couple of phone calls to arrange to have members of the church come and stay with her round the clock until I was discharged from the hospital and was able to resume my caregiving role. And we can't overstate how grateful we were for that assistance. And also we cannot overstate how comforting it is to know that we have that type of safety net available to us in situations like that. So, to wrap it up, for almost 40 years now, the UUCH has provided us with a place of worship, a place of friendship, and a place that's there for us in times of need. And likewise, we like the church to know that we are there for you. And for all this, Jefflin and I thank you.
Thank you, Bob. That was lovely. And now for our opening hymn. Please rise in body or spirit as you are able and join in singing our first hymn, number 83, which is in your gray hymnal, Winds Be Still.
Storm clouds apart.
After our first hymn, it is our tradition to sing our doxology, which is found on the blue laminated cards in the hymnal rack in front of you. After the doxology, we'll turn towards the center aisle and face one another as we speak our words of affirmation. May love be the spirit of this church. May the quest for truth be its sacrament and service be its prayer. Dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration. We now invite anyone who is young or young at heart to join us at the front of the sanctuary for our story for all ages. Our DRE, Jess, will be reading the story.
I Can Do Hard Things, Mindful Affirmations for Kids by Gabby Garcia, illustrated by Charity Russell. I don't always feel brave, confident, or strong. Sometimes it seems easier to follow others along. I get so many messages about how I should be. Pulled in different directions, I feel wobbly. When this happens, I listen for that quiet place inside. When I pay attention, that voice is my guide. I connect with the love and strength it brings. It helps me remember I can do hard things. I can be a friend to myself. I can feel all my feelings. I can ask for help. I can try again rather than give up. I can believe in myself. I can speak up when it would be easier to stay quiet. I can say no, even to my friends. I can apologize. And I can forgive. I can listen to and understand different points of view. I can care for my community. I can choose kindness. I can practice peace. I can share my gifts with the world. I can be myself. Hard things can be about what we think, feel, say, or do. What's hard for me may not be hard for you. You are you, and I am me. We walk through the world differently. Trusting my voice helps me find my way. I grow braver and stronger every day. The tough stuff I face is all my own. I can also remember I am not alone. I am ready for the hard things I have to do, and please remember, so are you. If we can all close our eyes now and think of some of the words that were said in this book. I can be a friend to myself. I can feel all my feelings. I can ask for help. I can try again rather than give up. I can believe in myself. I can speak up. I can say no, even to my friends. I can apologize. I can forgive. I can listen to, understand different points of view. I can care for my community. I can choose kindness. I can practice peace. I can share my gifts with the world. And I can do hard things. Let us remember these affirmations as we go on about our day and our weeks ahead. Let's now sing our children out.
Next, we're going to do our offering. We, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Huntsville, a proudly inclusive spiritual community. Together we build a broader search for meaning, a bolder form of compassion, a braver voice for justice. If you would like to support us with a monetary contribution, we would be ever so grateful. Your generosity helps us to support our various ministries, pay our staff a fair wage, and partner with organizations that share our UU values. You can also donate online using the QR code. You can put cash or checks in the offering baskets that are coming around now. Also put your completed circle of candle cards, if you wanted to send anything forward on that, into the baskets. It is through your generosity that we serve our mission here at UUCH. After the basket is passed, if you would like to come drop a stone into the bowl in honor or a memory of what you hold in your heart, you're welcome to do so. If you'll join me now in prayer, however that's appropriate for you, if you want to close your eyes or bow your head. Spirit of life, source of compassion and connection, join us as we enter into this time of prayer and intention. Hold us as we hold in care and concern these joys and sorrows shared here in our community and abroad. We offer prayers for Ukraine. We offer prayers for all of the turbulence that's happening in the world right now. We offer our prayers and gratitude for all that is great and wonderful in our world. Also in our prayers, Susie DeLacy reports both a joy and a sorrow. Ben has been away from home for 1 year now. Weekly family therapy and weekly visitation is going well. We are hopeful. Both a joy and a sorrow from Iris Black. Iris turned 67 on March the 4th. Woohoo! She says, I never believed I would live to see another year, so I am very thankful. Also, her brother-in-law who passed away, his memorial is today at 2 p.m. So please keep her family, his family, in your thoughts and prayers. And lastly, wow, Kathy Fisher has a joy to share. She says, I am so happy to tell you that Doak Mansfield and I are engaged. Whoa! For anyone who doesn't know, Doak was the minister of this church for many years. We dated in the late 1990s and have stayed close friends ever since. Details to follow as we figure out our plans. I am simply amazed at the rhythms of life. Let us be moved to compassion for all that has been shared here. Let us be moved to laughter for all the joys shared here. Into this beloved community, and for all that remains silent or unspoken in our hearts, let us say, blessed be and amen. And now will you join us in singing our responsive music, number 1009, Meditation on Breathing. It is in the Teal hymnal. I suspect you all know it by now.
When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love. When I breathe in, I breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I breathe out love.
And now you get to hear from somebody besides me. Our worship leader today is a guest minister, Reverend Kalen Fristed. He has visited us once before. I found his previous sermon fascinating, so he's going to be speaking with us today. He is a Methodist minister who champions teaching about universalism. And I think that's a perfect fit for us today. So with no further ado, if you'll please come forward.
Good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here with you today. I thoroughly enjoyed being here last summer. I think it was in July. And I feel privileged and honored to be able to be back here and share a message with you today. About 250 years ago, there lived a man named John Murray. He and his wife Eliza lived in England, and they were very religious people. They went to church every Sunday, and sometimes John Murray would preach the sermon. Now, this church that they were a part of was a Calvinist church, so it was not a very happy church. There was, not surprising, if you know about Calvinism, it can't be very happy, unfortunately, at least in the extreme form. But anyway, they talked a lot about a lot of people going to hell, and so it was not a very uplifting church. And so religion was very serious business, and people were expected to be serious. So there was no joking around in that church. One day, though, John and Eliza learned of another minister named James Raleigh, and they understood that he served a church where the people were happy. And they talked about everybody going to heaven. What a wonderful idea. And so after thinking about that for a few weeks, they finally decided that they would go and check out James Raleigh's church. And so they went to his church, and they discovered that the people there were happy, and they joked around, and they smiled, and they laughed. And when Reverend Raleigh stood up to preach, he preached a sermon about God's love and that everybody would eventually make it to heaven. And so they realized that he believed in universalism, and after John and Eliza heard him speak, they decided they believed in it as well. Now, James Raleigh was a Methodist. He was a part of the Methodist movement that was spreading across England in the 18th century, led by John Wesley, and he was a minister in the Church of England. Now, when John Murray came to believe in universalism, somebody from his church said, Have you and Eliza been going to hear that heretic, James Raleigh? And he said, yeah, we have. And do you believe that nonsense that everybody's eventually going to go to heaven? Yeah, we believe that. And so you can't say such things. And John Murray said, I must say them because it is such good news. And he said, you can't say that around here. And he says, I'm going to say it around here. Well, that being the case, since you can't talk about that in our church, you and your wife have to leave this church. So poor John and Eliza, none of their friends would talk with them, and they were lonesome and they were sad. But then they had a baby, and they were happy for a while. And that is because the baby got sick, and then Eliza got sick. And John Murray spent a lot of money on doctors, and he borrowed a lot of money to bring in more doctors, all to no avail. His wife and child, they both died. And John was not able to pay back all of the money that he had borrowed for medical treatments. And so he was put in debtor's prison. And so there John sat all alone in a cell with no job, no money, no family, and no friends. He decided that he had failed God, and he had failed his family, and he failed himself. He decided that he was never, ever going to be a part of a church again, and he was never, ever going to preach again, ever. Well, a few days later, Eliza's brother came to bail him out of prison. He paid the debt that he owed, and so he was set free. But he wasn't happy in England anymore, and he decided he wanted to have a new start in life, and so he decided to go to the American colonies. He bought a ticket on the sailing ship Hand in Hand, and the wind blew them across the Atlantic Ocean. And they were headed toward New York City, but the wind blew them off course, And instead of ending up in New York City, they ended up on a sandbar on the Jersey shore. And it was near Barnegat Bay, near the town of Good Luck, New Jersey. Now, the sailors were not able to get the ship freed because the wind was blowing hard from the east, and there they were stuck. And so John Murray, realizing that he really didn't have a lot of very good food on shore and on the ship, so he went ashore to see if he could rustle up some food. He met a man named Thomas Potter, who invited him into his home and gave him dinner. Now, Thomas Potter also believed in a loving God. He believed in universal salvation. He believed it so much that 10 years before that, he had built a chapel, and he was waiting and praying for a preacher to come to preach the good news of universalism in his chapel. And so he'd been waiting and waiting for the right preacher to come along, and here was a preacher who agreed with him, a preacher who believed in a loving God and in universal salvation. But John Murray said he had vowed that he was never, ever going to preach again. But Thomas Potter said, I believe that the wind that brought you here was the breath of God. And I believe that until you preach a sermon in my chapel, I believe the wind's going to keep blowing, keeping your ship on the shore. And so he said, if the wind has not changed before Sunday, will you conclude from that it is God's will that you come and preach in my chapel? Well, apparently it was a few days away, so probably John Murray felt pretty safe. But the wind kept blowing and blowing and blowing. And so on Sunday morning, September the 30th, 1770, John Murray went to church and he preached in Thomas Potter's chapel. He preached a sermon on universal salvation about a loving God, that everybody was eventually going to make it to heaven. I understand that he preached for about an hour and 45 minutes. So if you think I might be getting a little long this morning, just refer back to his hour and 45 minute long sermon. At the end of the sermon, someone came in from the ship saying, the wind has changed, the ship is freed, and we're going to be leaving soon for New York City. Well, John Murray decided not to leave with that ship. After his sermon, the people came up and thanked him so profusely for his sermon that he decided that he would associate with the church again and that he would preach again. And so John Murray decided that the wind really hadn't blown the ship off course, but the wind had directed them exactly to where they needed to be. He decided it wasn't just good luck that he ended up at Good Luck, New Jersey, but it was exactly where God wanted him to be. So he stayed with Thomas Potter for a while and preached a few more times at his chapel after that. John Murray did go on to regularly preach universalism, and he worked closely with the Quakers and the Baptists in spreading the teaching of universalism throughout the American colonies. In 1779, in the town of Gloucester, Massachusetts, John Murray became the first minister of a Universalist church in America. A few years ago, I had the privilege of preaching at that church. Gloucester, Massachusetts, it's a fishing town, or at least it always was in the past. So what an honor it was for me to stand in the pulpit and to echo the sermons of the good message that John Murray preached so long ago. It was under Murray's leadership then that the Universalist Church in America was organized, and he is often referred to as the father of universalism in America. John Murray died in 1815 after spending 45 years in preaching and teaching about universalism in the American colonies. John Murray's roots in the Universalist teachings were in the Methodist movement of England, 18th century England. But it grew into something rather magnificent. It grew into the Universalist Church in America, and by the middle of the 19th century, it grew to hundreds of thousands of members. And of course, the Universalist Church in America joined with the Unitarian Association, or Unitarian Church, to form the UUA in 1961. So, how about Thomas Potter? Who is he, and how did he come to believe in universalism? Now, Thomas Potter was an illiterate farmer. He was born in southern New Jersey in 1689. And so if you do the math, you discover that he was a lot older than John Murray. When he met John Murray was only 28 years old, but Thomas Potter was about 81 years of age. Now, 81 years of age is still a pretty good age, right? As I get closer, though, it seems younger all the time. But back then, just think about that. 81 years of age, that was remarkable, especially considering that the average life expectancy at that time was about 36 years of age. And so some people considered a miracle that the wind kept blowing to keep that ship on the shore until John Murray preached that sermon. But perhaps it is an equally great miracle that Thomas Potter lived long enough for John Murray to come to preach that sermon. So where did Thomas Potter's Universalist faith come from? Much of that answer revolves around a Christian group called the Rogerines. And they organized I guess you could say a church, a Christian group in New London, Connecticut in about 1674. So they'd been around for quite a while before that. But they also were a pretty vocal bunch. And so they'd come to believe in universalism or universal salvation, and they told everybody about it. Not surprisingly, that led to persecution because the Puritans, who were the dominant group at the time, they disagreed, and they said that is just wrong. And so they were very much persecuted, and because of their persecution, the Rogerines left Connecticut to find a place where it would be safer for them to live. And they ended up moving to New Jersey, where the Potter family lived. And so they were there basically for about 10 years before they moved on in the 1730s and 1740s. And they had a very lasting and significant influence on Thomas Potter. So Thomas Potter came to believe in universalism, but the question is, what could he do? He was an illiterate farmer, so it seemed that it probably didn't make too much sense for him to become a preacher. But he, as a farmer, had learned how to build buildings. And so he decided he was going to build a chapel and then wait for a preacher to come and pray for a preacher to come to preach in his chapel. Now, I can imagine that he wasn't a very popular guy. He was about 70 years old when he started to build this chapel. And the neighbors, I thought, well, you old fool, what are you up to? Why do you think somebody's going to come and preach in this church that you are working so hard at? Besides, you're an old guy. You'll probably die long before somebody comes along. Anyway, and so I'm guessing, though, that he would have said, you'll see, somebody will eventually come to preach in my chapel. Now, if you are familiar with the movie Field of Dreams, you already have that figured out, don't you? The connection. You know, in that movie, the message came to a farmer, build it and he will come. Well, he didn't even know what that meant, but he eventually came to realize that he was to build a baseball field and that somebody was going to come, presumably somebody to come back from the dead, maybe Shoeless Joe Jackson would come and play in his baseball field. And so he built a baseball field with the confidence of build it and he will come. And he didn't know who was to come, but then he eventually realized, well, Shoeless Joe Jackson did come to play in his field along with some other people. But the ultimate reason why he was to build this baseball field was to be reconciled with his deceased son, with his deceased father. So Thomas Potter's chapel was the original Field of Dreams, if you will, right? Or the Chapel of Dreams. He believed in build it and he will come. And he built the chapel believing that a preacher was going to come. And when John Murray showed up, at his door, he said, welcome, I've been expecting you. Unfortunately, Potter only lived a few more years after that. He died in 1777. He didn't live long enough to see the formation of the Universalist Church in America or to see the rapid growth of the Universalist Church in the years ahead. But he had been faithful in building the chapel, and I'm sure he received great satisfaction of knowing that he had been faithful to build the chapel and that the preacher had indeed come. So that was the beginning of a wonderful new development in Christian churches, really, in the American colonies. During the time of the early church, you're perhaps aware that Christians commonly believed in universalism. And then they decided to abolish the teaching in the 6th century. So it was like 500 and some years they predominantly believed in universalism until the church turned against the teaching. But then that started to come back several hundred years ago. But the Universalist Church, like I say, the Universalist teaching was dominant during the early church. And so things have begun to change, though, with the arrival of the Universalists and the Universalist Church in America. And so before that, there were the Moravians and there were the Rogerines. But as far as I know, those are the only two groups, and they weren't really very big or very influential. But then along came the Universalist Church in America, and what a difference they made. It was a powerful and profound difference in helping people to be more accepting of the teaching of universalism in really all of the other churches in the American colonies. And because they had been so successful, the teaching of universalism has been widely accepted in a lot of denominations today, and that is evident in the United Methodist Church. You see, it became evident early in my ministry that I believed in universalism. The reason it became evident is that because I challenged a district superintendent who was my superior. I challenged him to a debate on the subject of universalism. It was at School for Ministry. So there was hundreds of ministers there, and I debated him. And that was early on. I guess I didn't know any better because I was too young. But it was a lot of fun. And so people learned early on that I believed in universalism. And that was not a problem. I was able to continue to serve churches in the United Methodist Church in Iowa for my entire ministry. And so what a difference the Universalists made, because if they hadn't had that influence on the Christians in our country, then I would have been just expelled from the church. I couldn't have continued to be a minister for sure. And now, of course, there are other denominations, like United Church of Christ, Episcopal, Lutheran, Presbyterian, and others, who are such where they accept people who believe in universalism. That's not a part of their official doctrine for the most part. But at least they don't kick people out, and they basically have the belief that it's perfectly okay to believe in universalism if you want to, but you don't have to. So things are changing. And another area of change is that I'm personally aware of at least 50 books that have been written on the subject of universalism in the last 20 years or so. And that is quite an amazing thing when you consider that in the 100 years before that, there was only about 3 or 4 books written on the subject. And since then, the last 21 years basically, there's more than 50 books written on universalism. And so it is a powerful movement, to be sure. And then there's a lot of websites that have been developed specifically for the purpose of spreading the teaching of universalism. And now it seems that almost everybody has a podcast. And that's the way the message is spread. And I'm aware of several podcasts where they are spread the teaching of universalism. So what that means is that we're moving back to the way it was during the time of the early church, when it was widely believed and accepted that everybody would go to heaven, that universalism was embraced. But this movement is not only a Christian movement. For example, everybody who believes in reincarnation really is a part of this universalist movement, because you're probably aware that with reincarnation, You just keep coming back to live subsequent lives and keep learning and growing until you eventually reach nirvana, or in Christian terms, that would be heaven. And so I understand that when you add the people who believe in reincarnation to the Universalist movement, you end up with billions of people. I understand that it's about half the people in the world at this time believe in reincarnation. And so they're part of the Universalist movement. And then there are people who don't necessarily believe in universalism, and in many cases they don't even believe in God or in life after death, but at the very least they reject the idea of a God of eternal damnation. They reject the idea that a lot of people are going to go to hell. And so people, regardless of their religious beliefs or lack thereof, many times are really in reality a part of the Universalist movement. So the good news is that we are a part of a powerful and growing movement around the world, not just of a few 100,000 people or millions of people, but we are a part of a movement that includes billions of people around the world. And one of the reasons why we believe in universalism is because we believe in the power of love and the preciousness of each individual. And because of that, we don't write anybody off. We believe that there's hope for everybody, redemption for everybody. And reflective of the size of our movement, just think of what all we've been able to accomplish over the years in working together with other people of good faith. We've accomplished great things like the abolition of slavery and the civil rights movement and the women's rights movements, the establishment of democracies in countries as well as organizing according to democratic principles in churches and other organizations. And just think what a difference we can make in the future. And we have a lot of problems in our world, in our country and around the world at this time. And so we need to accomplish a lot. And so it seems to me in the future we can continue to challenge people to challenge the belief that a lot of people are going to be tortured forever in hell. We will continue to conduct uplifting and inspirational church services promoting healthy and enlightened spirituality. We'll work to overcome racism and bigotry in whatever forms they exist, and we'll promote positive, healthy, respectful, and peaceful relationships in our families and communities and around the world. We'll stand for the freedom and rights of everyone and work to sustain our planet. So we Universalists are a part of a big and a powerful movement. We've already accomplished a lot in the past, and we have great plans for the future, and we have only just begun. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Preston. And now our closing hymn in the teal hymnal, number 1020. Whoa, ya, ya.
We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. It will be hard, we know, and the road will be muddy and rough, but we'll get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, whoa, ya, whoa, ya, ya, whoa, ya, ya, whoa, ya, ya. We are going, heaven knows where we are going, but we know within, and we will get there. Heaven knows how we will get there, but we know we will. Whoa, ya, ya, 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 ya.
Let us now take a moment to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Friends, our worship service now comes to a close. Please join us for coffee, tea, and snacks in the fellowship hall. For those of you on the live stream, thank you for being with us this morning. Amen and blessed be. And let us go out singing our Rite of Community, number 1039 in the Teal Hymnal, Be Thou With Us.